The Chargers are trying to get to 500 at 4-4. USC fired defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, a move USC Nation had been calling for since last season. USC head coach Lincoln Riley had no choice. The move comes less than 24 hours after USC lost at home Saturday night to Washington 52-42. In the last 6 games, the Trojans defense has allowed 43.6 points per game. In their last 3, they have given up 1,581 yards in total offense. Saturday's loss dropped USC out of the AP Top 25 poll for the first time in Riley's 2 seasons at USC. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 invites you to join us in celebrating the season of giving by being part of the solution. As we enjoy great food, family, warmth, and well wishes in whatever our festive tradition may be, we share the beauty of the season by reaching out to the less fortunate. Please help us to help others with the KBLA Cover the Houseless Cozy Community Coat and Blanket Drive. All you have to do is drop off new or clean, gently used winter coats and blankets in the KBLA lobby during business hours. Now through December 20th, all of the coats and blankets will be donated to unsheltered individuals and families experiencing houselessness. Simply bring your donation to 4434 Crenshaw Boulevard in Los Angeles, near Vernon Avenue, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. That's 4434 Crenshaw in historic Leimert Park. During the holidays and every day, let's remember, we keep us safe. We keep us warm. We are the safety net, and together we can cover the unsheltered. Get caught up in the spirit of the season, the spirit of love. Make a difference with your friends at KBLA Talk 1580.
They didn't live long lives, but they lived meaningful lives. Their lives were distressingly small in quantity, but glowingly large in quality. And no greater tribute can be paid to you as parents, and no greater epitaph can come to them as children. Shakespeare had Horatio to say some beautiful words as he stood over the dead body of Hamlet. And today, as I stand over the remains of these beautiful, darling girls, I paraphrase the words of Shakespeare. Good night, sweet princesses. Good night, those who symbolize a new day. And may the flight of angels take thee to thy eternal rest.
The voice of the one and only Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Delivering the eulogy for those 4 little girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church in what was then called Birmingham, Alabama, for obvious reasons. I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you tuned in to us this hour. Our guest is Jerry Mitchell, founder of the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting and author of a book called Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder cases of the Civil Rights era. I look forward to a conversation in this hour about some of the nation's most notorious civil rights crimes as far back as 60 years ago. Jerry Mitchell, good to have you on this program. How are you today, sir?
Doing well, Mr. Smiley. Appreciate it so much.
No, good to have you on the program. Please call me Tavis, and I'm delighted to have you on for the hour, man. Thank you. When you hear, every time I hear it, I get chills. When you hear Dr. King's voice delivering the eulogy for these 4 little girls, you think what? How does it process? How does it hit you?
Well, it's just it hits my soul deeply, and even more so the families that I know and lived through this. It's just awful what happened, and beyond what we can really imagine. And so was fortunate enough to attend the 60th anniversary memorial service not too long ago, and just to see the crowd gathered and to recall what happened. And of course, this is a culmination. The reason for the attack on this church was because this church become a place from which the children had marched in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And so just it's so moving, but grateful too to see some of the people who were responsible for that awful terrorist attack
mm-hmm.
To finally be punished.
For those who don't recall this, and you just put your finger on it, this bombing at this church, which killed these 4 little girls, was primarily, or certainly in large part, a retaliation against this church for these kids marching in the streets. And the church was the origin, the place that many of them marched from. So this terrorist attack was really designed as a punishment for the church for being involved in the movement and organizing these kids to march there from their locale. That's pretty devastating to hear all these years later. I mean, those of us who know the story know how just despicable that was. But to punish a church
Yes.
by killing 4 little girls for their
Yes.
involvement in allowing kids to march in the movement, it's arresting to hear. Not that this kind of nonsense doesn't still happen in this country and parts around the globe where white supremacy raises, of course, its ugly head. But to think that they were punishing, Jerry, the church for allowing those kids to march it's arresting all over again.
It is, and of course that was one of 40-something bombings just in Birmingham alone.
Mm-hmm.
The attacks on the black community. That's why it was called Birmingham, as you mentioned earlier.
Sure.
There was actually a black neighborhood that had the nickname of Dynamite Hill. And of course, Fred Shuttlesworth, who's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes forgotten in this story, was the one who invited Dr. King in.
Right.
He had his house blown up on Christmas Day. He was severely beaten by a white mob when he tried to enroll his 2 daughters at all-white Birmingham School in 1957. In fact, one of the bombers actually participated in that attack.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Bobby Cherry. So,
yeah,
it's just it's incredible to think. I think the thing that's unfortunate these days is people don't want to talk about it. They say, "Oh, this is uncomfortable history," and I'm just staggered by that, because history can often be uncomfortable. I know I saw a teacher tweet out the other day. She was on Twitter and said, I have a white student, 8th grade student. They were just studying about Native Americans, something that happened to Native Americans. And so why do we have to study about things that are so sad? And she was asking for how she could respond to this student. And what I suggested as a response was, sometimes history is sad, sometimes it's happy, but we must tell the truth. That's what's important. We've got to tell the truth. Yeah. And the truth is, white supremacy has long been a part of this nation's history.
Yeah, what some people call uncomfortable history, our guest in this hour, Jerry Mitchell, calls a race against time. And that's what this conversation is going to be about. When we come forward, I want to ask him directly, what is this race against time that we find ourselves in regarding the drive to reopen some of these unsolved murder cases of the Civil Rights era? And speaking of the 4 little girls killed in that 16th Street Baptist Church, I once, well, actually more than once, I've known Condi Rice, that's Condoleezza Rice. We had a guest in our first hour who's a regular contributor to this program, Jerry. Her name is Connie Rice. And Connie Rice just happens to be the first cousin of Condi Rice. So Connie and Condoleezza are first cousins. Their politics are nothing alike. there's a fascinating story that Condi Rice told me about the 16th Street Baptist Church. Condi was born and raised in Birmingham. And I'll tell you an interesting story about Condi on the day of this bombing at the church that you may not know. And we'll talk about that and a great deal more with Jerry Mitchell when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac, perfected like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Dilly, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac, Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com. Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
Los Angeles, black men are dying from preventable health causes and diseases, but you can be part of the solution. Join us Saturday, November 11th at the Michelle and Barack Obama Sports Complex next to Dorsey High for the African American Male Wellness 5K Walk and Run. Walk for your brother, walk for your father, walk for your son, walk for your uncle, walk for yourself. This is a free, family-friendly event for the entire community. We'll have free health screenings, vendors, kids' activities, and more. We'll see you at 8 a.m.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. I'm here with Lisa Stevens, Senior Business Consultant with Chase for Business. Lisa, what's one tip you'd give to business owners here in the Crenshaw area?
I love that you asked that question. I'm originally from Brooklyn, and I grew up in an area that's very similar to Crenshaw. So this is near and dear to my heart. And if I could only leave a business owner with just one, I would tell the business owner to identify their why. And I think that is so important because your why is going to be that strength on those days where you feel like you're struggling. Your why is going to be that stepping stone. Those days that you want to give up, your why is going to be the reason that you get back up.
And how would you advise business owners looking to acquire capital? What do they need to know before stepping inside the branch to ask for funding?
So 3 things. I do want to share this when it comes to the power of capital and just finding those resources. Understand that capital is a 3-part of a business, right? It's not always about the monetary piece, but if you first put that intellectual, right? What do I need to know? That social, who I need to know, that will help you to then package for that monetary piece. So no matter who you're banking with, you should know your banker. Never walk into a bank and you're transactional only.
It's just like Lisa to drop gems. I'm Maisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
15 minutes past midnight, Evers got out of his car beside his home in a Negro residential area. In a vacant lot about 40 yards away, a sniper fired a single shot from a high-powered rifle at Evers' silhouette. The bullet hit him in the back, crashed through his body, through a window into the house. He died within an hour at a Jackson hospital. City detectives believe the fatal shot was fired from this sweet gum tree. They have found a rifle in the bushes which they think is the murder weapon. They say they also have other clues.
Earlier we played a clip of Dr. King delivering the eulogy for the 4 little girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. And there you hear an NBC News file report about the night that Medgar Evers was murdered in his driveway in Jackson, Mississippi. At the time, of course, Medgar was the head of the NAACP in Mississippi. And we are talking in this hour with investigative reporter Jerry Mitchell about the race against time that we are in to reopen and solve some of these murder cases of the civil rights era, some as far back, of course, as 60 years ago. His book is called Race Against Time. and we'll talk about the race against time we are in just a moment. I promised minutes ago that I would tell you a quick story in case you've not heard this story, and I didn't know this until Condi. I mean, I've known Condi for years, and we've had some interesting exchanges. Our politics are not the same, obviously, not by far. She's a Republican, conservative. I'm an unapologetically progressive person, and yet we spent a lot of time together over the years and had a number of conversations. As a matter of fact, speaking of the South and the Civil Rights era, we were both invited with a few others to speak at the homegoing service for Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama, in the church that she attended while she lived in the city. You'll recall after the Montgomery bus boycott some years later, she moved from Montgomery to Detroit, Mrs. Parks did, where she worked for many years for the late, great Congressman John Conyers. A little history if you didn't know this. So she leaves Montgomery, moves to Detroit, and for many years, for decades, she worked for John Conyers, the late, great Congressman out of Detroit, until she retired and spent a lot of time here in L.A. in the winter months. She'd leave Detroit in the winter months and come to L.A., and that's how I got to meet Mrs. Parks and become dear friends with her in my very first book signing years ago. I've written 24 books now. My very first book signing was a book signing that she invited me to do with her. There's a whole story behind that. But imagine as a young black guy, young male, doing your first signing for your very first book, and you're doing it seated next to Rosa Parks. Quite the story. I'll say that for another time. But she and I were dear friends. And so I was invited to give the eulogy, one of the eulogies at her service in Montgomery. And seated beside me that day was Condi Rice, representing the Bush administration. So Condi and I were seatmates at the homegoing service for Rosa Parks. But we had a number of conversations publicly and privately, Secretary of State Condi Rice and I did. And in one of those conversations, Jerry, she shared with me the story of course, I knew this part, being born and raised in Birmingham. Her family eventually moved to Denver. They left Birmingham because it was, in fact, Birmingham, and her father was afraid to stay in that city much longer. Part of what put the fear in Condi's father was that Condi was really good friends with one of the 4 girls killed in that bombing. And Condi had been invited to go to church with her friend that day. So Condi was literally on her way to the 16th Street Baptist Church for service that day. And had she gone, she would have been in the basement, seated next to her friend when that bomb went off. They killed her friend and 3 other girls. Condi would have been seated right there, and we might not ever know the name, as we've noted, Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State. And the only reason why she wasn't there is because her father remembered at the last minute that they were having a special program at their church that day. And Condi was disappointed, almost to the point of tears, because she had promised her friend that she would go with her, and she was excited to go to church with her friend that Sunday morning. But her father said, no, not today, Condi. We have a special program at our church, and I'm sorry, I forgot, but you got to go to our home church today. And next Sunday, I'll let you go with your friend. And only because of that, Condi Rice was not in that basement at the 16th Street Baptist Church, seated next to her friend. Her friend dies, Condi lives. Her father couldn't take it anymore, and they eventually moved out of Birmingham and moved to Denver, Colorado. And that's a whole nother fascinating story because when she's in Colorado, her father's a professor, and Condi ends up as a student years later. Years later, Condi ends up as Secretary of State. But her predecessor, Madeleine Albright, was taught by Condi's father. It's a fascinating story, these relationships between student and teacher, Secretary of State, just a fascinating sort of story. But anyway, Condi would have been in that church that Sunday morning had that not happened. So if you never heard that Condi Rice story, it's a true story.
I've not.
Yeah, Condi shared
incredible.
It's an incredible story. Condi shared that with me, and so it's life has interesting twists and turns. That said, your book is called A Race Against Time. You mentioned earlier there are many that don't want to hear this history, don't want to talk about it. They call it uncomfortable history, but you call it a race against time. So let me just ask you point blank: what is the race against time that we find ourselves in?
Well, it's a race against time to learn the truth, to tell the truth. It's a race against time to, for justice, I think, as well. And certainly, as I outlined in the book, There were witnesses who were dying. There were, suspects who were dying. And so it was literally a race. It's been a race against time to, pursue these cases before these people die, before important witnesses die, before evidence is lost. So that's hence the reason for it being called race against time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what does one do when one's an investigative reporter and one is concerned about these unsolved murder cases of the civil rights era? As a reporter, as an investigative reporter, what does one do? How does one move? What leverage does one have? What pressure does one use through his writing, through his work? Tell me what your role is as an investigative reporter in this process of trying to reopen some of these unsolved murder cases.
Well, I view our job as investigative reporters, and especially in keeping with these cases, is our job is to expose the truth. Like, let a light shine on what really happened. And that's our job. We share, the truth of what happened, because a lot of people don't know these things. For example, you mentioned about the Birmingham church bombing. I'm sure a number of people have heard about the Birmingham church bombing, but they may not realize that 50 other people were injured. People may have heard of Rosa Parks, but they may not realize that 4 other young black women were arrested on Montgomery bus before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. And so those are the kind of things people need to know and perhaps don't know. And I know a number of people who've read my book said, I had no idea, and mainly white Americans have come back to me and said, I had no idea all this happened. And by knowing that, you can do something, you can try to do something about it, maybe make amends in some way as a society. But with regard to these particular cases, we expose what happened. Like, we go and interview witnesses. We go and see what the FBI collected at the time. We go and look to see what local law enforcement information they collect at the time. We get transcripts and other kinds of information and try to collect all this information, began to share it. And, so I just think the press plays a critical role. I'll give a quick example in the Medgar Evers case that you played the audio from earlier. When I began looking at that case in 1989, what I found out was I found these secret records that involved the state segregationist spy agency here in Mississippi that was known as the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission. And if you're like me, if someone tells me I can't have something, I want it a million times worse. And so there was something, like I said, the Sovereignty Commission existed. It was headed by the governor. And it turned out from these secret documents that they had secretly assisted Byron D. Beckwith in terms of trying to get him acquitted for Medgar Evers' murder. And nobody knew that at the time. And so I wrote a story about that October 1st of 1989. At the time I wrote the story, the odds were literally more than 1,000,000-1 against the case ever being reopened, re-prosecuted. There was no murder weapon, nothing, no evidence left, no court transcript. But Myrlie Evers, the widow of Medgar Evers, believed and she prayed, and some amazing things happened. A couple months later, Jackson police are cleaning out a closet. It contained the crime scene photographs of the killing of Medgar Evers, including the fingerprint of Byron D. Beckwith lifted from the murder weapon. A few months after that, Myrlie Evers shared with me her copy of the court transcript that she had saved. And a few months after that, the prosecutor in the case found the murder weapon in his father-in-law's closet, which sounds like I'm making it up, but it really happened. So those you begin to push for justice, and people, I think it begins, you begin to write the truth, and people begin to be upset about injustice being done. And then they, too, realize, hey, something should be done about this. So that's the way I kind of view the role of an investigative reporter in this.
Yep. It raises a fascinating question, which we may get to later in this hour, about whether or not justice delayed is, in fact, justice denied. We'll put a pin. We'll put a pin in that we'll put a pin in that for the time being, Jerry. But let me just ask you though, whether or not you believe that all these decades later, the South does, in fact, how might I put this? Whether or not the South has the stomach to really reopen these cases, to wrestle with these unsolved murders. And I ask that because we all remember the story not too long ago when, speaking to your point of going in the closet and finding something, you recall they found that arrest warrant for Carolyn Bryant Donham. This is the white one.
In a basement.
Sure, in a basement. This is the white woman that accused Emmett Till of whistling at her and insulting her, and we know the story what happened to poor Emmett Till. But that arrest warrant was never served on Carolyn Bryant Donham. And when they found that in the arrest warrant, when they found that arrest warrant in a box in the basement, there were folk demanding, if nothing else, she was already in a convalescent home at the time, a nursing home, as I recall, a senior home. But there were those who were demanding that, given that they had found that arrest warrant, that at a very minimum that arrest warrant be served. Here this lady had lived 50-some years, 58, 59 years beyond that moment of Emmett's murder. She was never arrested. And so they refused, prosecutors did, they refused for a variety of reasons to actually serve that warrant on Carolyn Bryant Donham to the dissatisfaction of many. Again, that's my Exhibit A. My question is whether or not you think, even with evidence, even with arrest warrants, et cetera, 60 years later, does the stomach have the South to wrestle with to reopen many of these murder cases?
Well, at times they have. I know, for example, you mentioned the Birmingham church bombing. Doug Jones was the prosecutor.
I love Doug. Love Doug. Great guy. Yeah, I love him. Yeah.
And, of course, went on to be a senator for Alabama for a term. And so you have examples like that where sons of the South or daughters of the South have gotten involved in these cases and helped to bring them about. And yes, you're right. I mean, justice this many years later is not really true justice in many ways. It's just partial justice, maybe would be a term for it. But it is important because it is, what is society saying about this? Is this okay or this is not okay? So it's important from that perspective, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I think there is some some people are willing to do it, and then some aren't. They see it and they go, "Well, that happened a long time ago." I mean, I have people that have told me, they'll see my stories, and these guys that committed these crimes, and they see photographs or footage of these Klansmen going to courtrooms or going off to prison, and they'll say to me, "Jerry, why don't you leave these old men alone?" And I tell them these were young killers.
Yeah,
they just happened to get old.
No, powerful point. They were young killers who happened to get old. I'm thinking of our Jewish brothers and sisters right now. We were discussing the Israel-Hamas war in the first hour of today's program, and they have a very powerful phrase, a powerful frame, and it's just two words: never again. Never again. And whenever they find anybody who was anywhere in any way connected to the Holocaust, they will come for you. And they say, again, repeatedly, never again. So you're right. They're old men now, but they were young killers then. I'll put a pin in that for the moment. When we come forward, we'll continue our conversation with Jerry Mitchell, author of the book Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder cases of the civil rights era. And I specifically want to ask Jerry, when we come forward, about some of the cases that are not so well known, that he's been writing about and researching, that ought to be reopened at this moment in time. We know about the 4 little girls. We know about Medgar Evers. We know about Emmett Till. But are there other cases that we don't know so well that he is arguing today ought to be reopened, ought to be looked at again? We'll talk about that with Jerry Mitchell when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Washington, D.C., a vote to confirm Pamela Smith as the next Metropolitan Police Department chief could come as early as tomorrow. The D.C. Council Public Safety Committee voted unanimously to approve Smith's nomination in October. Smith has served as acting chief for the past several months. Now, if confirmed, she'd be the first black woman to lead the agency in its 230-year history. Negotiators with SAG-AFTRA could have a response to the latest contract offer from the major Hollywood studios today. Sunday night, SAG-AFTRA leaders said they are now reviewing the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers' best, last, and final offer. Screen actors have been on strike for 115 days. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? Call the accident guys to speak with a real expert attorney for a free consultation.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams failed to get into the end zone at Green Bay yesterday. They lose by 17. The Rams fall to 3-6. It's a Monday night game tonight for the Chargers. They're in New York to take on the Jets. The Chargers are trying to get to 500 at 4-4. USC fired defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, a move USC Nation had been calling for since last season. USC head coach Lincoln Riley had no choice. The move comes less than 24 hours after USC lost at home Saturday night to Washington 52-42. In the last 6 games, the Trojans defense has allowed 43.6 points per game. In their last 3, they have given up 1,581 yards in total offense. Saturday's loss dropped USC out of the AP Top 25 poll for the first time in Riley's 2 seasons at USC. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Want to save big on custom faux wood blinds, shutters, cellular shades, and more? Shop Blindster today and save up to 50% over comparable blinds from brick-and-mortar stores. Get custom blinds at low prices and free shipping at Blindster.com.
This open enrollment season, LA Care Covered is offering health plans starting at $0 a month. Each plan provides benefits including $0 preventive services, 24/7 telehealth services, around-the-clock nurse advice lines, walk-in minute clinics, and more. Shop and compare premium silver plans with $0 deductibles to help meet your health goals. Ready to shop? Visit us online at lacarecovered.org for a commitment-free instant quote or speak with us directly at 855-222-4239. LA Care Covered, your affordable path to wellness.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look, and unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at the gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
Los Angeles, black men are dying from preventable health causes and diseases, but you can be part of the solution. Join us Saturday, November 11th at the Michelle and Barack Obama Sports Complex next to Dorsey High for the African American Male Wellness 5K Walk and Run. Walk for your brother, walk for your father, walk for your son, walk for your uncle, walk for yourself. This is a free, family-friendly event for the entire community. We'll have free health screenings, vendors, kids' activities, and more. We'll see you at 8 a.m.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
Cam, we got 3 kids missing down there. What can I do about it? Well, I don't know. I don't believe there's 3 missing. Now, I'm going to tell you why I don't think there's a damn thing to it. They were put in jail in Philadelphia, in East Mississippi, right next to John Stennis' home county. And they were going to Meridian. There's not a Ku Klux Klan in that area. There's not a citizens council in that area. There's no organized white man in that area. So that's why I think it's a publicity stunt.
He calls it a publicity stunt. Let me unpack what you just heard. So the guy calling this incident a publicity stunt was then Mississippi Senator John Eastland. The other voice you heard was that of LBJ. This is a phone call between President Lyndon B. Johnson and Mississippi Senator, again, John Eastland. And LBJ is calling Senator Eastland to ask him what he knows about these 3 missing men. Care to guess who those 3 missing men were? You heard him say Philadelphia. Yep, you know who it is. Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. We all know the story well. These 3 civil rights workers who were murdered in Mississippi. Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. A phone call again between the president, Lyndon Johnson, and the senator from that state, John Eastland, about what he knows about these 3 missing men. And John Eastland, Jerry Mitchell, essentially calls it a publicity stunt. What do you make of that phone call?
Well, that phone call, which I've heard before, just angers me. He knew there was Klan. There was Klan there. It was Klan rampant in Neshoba County. So it's just not true, for starters. And the fact that he's telling the president of the United States it's a hoax. Mm-hmm. That says a lot, isn't it? Says a lot, and it's just, we're all, it's not like Senator Eastland was that disconnected of the White Citizens Council and and all those, white supremacist guys. They just weren't. They worked on their campaigns. Some of these Klansmen worked on their campaigns. Edgar Ray Killen worked on Senator Eastland's campaigns. It's just a fact, and it's just fascinating how they try to distance themselves from what happened. And he wasn't alone. And he later on, I think, said, well, I don't guess it was him, it was somebody else, a Mississippi politician, said that they're probably smoking cigars right now with Fidel Castro in Cuba. It was that kind of garbage. And the governor of Mississippi stood at the Neshoba County Fair and said, why, there are more people missing today in Harlem than there are in Mississippi. and he was literally standing within like a mile or two from where the bodies were buried. I mean, it's just incredible,
Yeah.
The audacity of Eastland and some of the others.
No, it's fascinating to hear all these years later the voice of President Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson, talking to this senator of Mississippi about these three missing men. And, of course, again, the bodies of Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were eventually found. But to hear him call this a hoax and a publicity stunt, it's just really hard to square, hard to juxtapose with the reality that these three young men were murdered in Mississippi. Our guest is Jerry Mitchell. His book is called Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder cases of the civil rights era. So we've talked about the four little girls, Jerry, in Birmingham. We've talked about Medgar Evers and Jackson, Neshoba County. We talk about now with Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, some of the more famous cases regarding persons who were murdered during the civil rights era. But I asked a moment ago if you might just tee up a couple of things that you've been writing about, and you and your team at the Center for Investigative Reporting there in Mississippi have been working on that we ought to know more about, and why some of these cases ought to be reopened as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'll take it forward a little bit, beyond just the civil rights era, because, these kinds of killings have continued to happen, and violence, beyond just the killings, violence against African Americans. For example, in 2018, there was a black man who was killed in jail in Grenada, Mississippi, and he died at the hands of law enforcement. This is just before the George Floyd. Okay, officer kneeled on his neck. Other officers, this is all on video. Officer kneeled on his neck. Other officers kneeled on his back. And got up off of him, and he never breathed again. The officers, not only were they not charged, they were never even disciplined in this case, and that kind of thing. And so, and his mom died in the same jail years earlier, she was hogtied. So these kind of incidents have gone on, and people don't know about them, and it's only because I was able to get a video, posted online, that people even knew about it. So those are the kind of things that happen, and we need to let people know. Yeah.
Why is it in 2023? Why is it that we all know the name George Floyd, and I'm glad we do. Hate that we had to come to know the name through that particular process. With Derek Chauvin and those other cops who murdered him, essentially. But why is it that we know the name of George Floyd and we don't know the name of this young man who was murdered in the same way in Mississippi?
Yeah. Oh, it's because of the publicity. I mean, George Floyd got international, publicity, and the Robert Loggins didn't, for whatever reasons. And so, and like I said, it didn't just happen to him; it happened to his own mom too, in the same jail. So, it's a story that ought to be known. Yeah, for sure.
What is the recourse? Again, to your being an investigative reporter and working with your team to get these unsolved murder cases reopened. Like, what's in a case like that? What's your recourse? Yeah.
Well, we've written about it at length and continue to write about it. There's currently a civil case currently against the department and the officers involved. In fact, the officer that kneeled on him, actually, the county or pardon me, the city refused to represent. So he had to go get his own lawyer. But it's pretty obvious, and these guys even lied to the investigators who investigated this, and that's the thing that's just galling. But what we do is we expose this, and like I said, now there's going to be a civil trial on this. But hopefully, what'll come out of this is, I know the FBI has been looking at it, so hopefully there'll be something, potentially done. As well on the criminal side, because obviously what these guys did was terribly wrong.
Yeah. More to come with Jerry Mitchell. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk This is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Environmental justice, pollution, and climate. In Los Angeles and across America, people of color are suffering and dying from disproportionate health impacts on a planet that has less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage. Heat illnesses, respiratory illnesses, water-related illnesses, food system impacts, insect-related diseases, black maternal health, and mental health effects. As the impacts of climate change mount, millions of vulnerable people, our people, are going to bear the brunt of these extreme environmental events, which will likely lead to forced displacement, loss of cultural identity, and other related risks. These realities are as real as rain. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details about the most progressive multimedia and live events campaign any black media outlet has ever undertaken to combat the climate catastrophe. Experts, events, empowerment. It's all on the way from unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580. We don't black down. We level up.
Level up, 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 level up.
Thinking about hosting a podcast and don't know where to start? Morris Media Studios has you covered. We're a professional podcast and voiceover studio located in Leimert Park. We specialize in recording and live streaming audio and video podcasts. Let us help you set up, record, and distribute your podcast. Hosting a podcast is a great way to bring awareness to your business, product, or good cause. For more info, visit morrismediastudios.com or give us a call at 323-815-4204.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Jerry Mitchell, I could have asked you this question to commence our conversation, but I want to ask it now before I end up losing you at the top of the hour here. I'm always curious about the backstory of people who decide to spend their lives in pursuit of any particular thing, but especially in pursuit of justice. Not enough folk dedicate themselves to that. So let's just ask a personal question if I can. What animates you? What drives you to do this every day? To do the research, to do the work, to try to get these cases not just written about and make the public aware of them, but to get them reopened and prosecuted. What drives you in that regard?
Well, I think very simply the injustice of it. It's outrageous. I mean, justice should shouldn't have to do with the color of people's skin. I mean, but unfortunately, historically in this country, it's been a dual system of justice, and that's for people of color and for those who happen to be white, and that's unfortunate. We can't do that. We can't survive as a society and have that. So yeah. That's why we've got to, That's why, that's what angers me. I mean, for example, these civil rights cases, mm-hmm. What's really upsetting when you think about them, it was not just that these guys got away with murder. It was the fact that everybody knew they got away with murder. Mm-hmm. So it's like the height of injustice. So if you have a homicide captured on video and nobody is prosecuted and not even disciplined for that. That needs to be exposed. We're currently working on, our center is working on these cases. You may have heard about this case, the Goon Squad.
Oh, yeah. No,
You heard about this?
Absolutely.
The two black men. And so we're investigating not just what happened in that particular case. We're certainly looking at that, but we're looking at other cases, like other instances of violence that this squad carried out, and it's more than a few.
Well,
it's more than a few.
The amazing thing about the Goon Squad story, as you know, is that it's a rare example. I mean, frankly, as you know, you cover this, it's historic. Mm-hmm. It's never happened.
Oh, yeah.
Where all these cops pled guilty. They knew. They knew they were dead to rights. And so in this Goon Squad, these cops all pled guilty. Now, the unfinished business, I was just in Mississippi a couple months ago, and I met with family members. I spoke there. I was literally there. I was there during the Emmett Till anniversary weekend over the summer. And I got download on this case pretty well when I was there. And the question that they were wrestling with when I was there was how they were going to get rid of Brian Bailey. So the Goon Squad, they've gotten rid of, but the sheriff is still in power. The question is, how do you get rid of the sheriff that oversaw all of this?
Well, and it's a good question. Mississippi law, it makes it very, very difficult to get rid of a sheriff. Yeah. I mean, the only way you would, like, let's say he gets, hypothetically, if he were to get charged, indicted, and then convicted, then he would be automatically kicked out of office.
Yeah, but that's the sad irony that they got the members of his department. The Goon Squad is no more for all the horror and terror that they inflicted. They are no more. But the guy that ran the department, the sheriff, is still there. I digress. Our remaining moments with Jerry Mitchell when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the Evan-On, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time-to-talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Happy holidays, foodies! Les Affairs is your local Black-owned event planning and catering service you can trust to provide a Thanksgiving free of the holiday scaries. Find us at lesaffairsevents.com. No grocery shopping in this haunting economy, laboring over a burning stove or battling the boogeyman, the dishes. Spooky season's over. Let Les Affairs cater your feast. Order from our selection of meats and sides delivered Thanksgiving Eve. Next day, heat, eat, and enjoy. Learn more at lesaffairsevents.com or Instagram at lesaffairsevents, LESAFFAIRESEVENTS. Bon appetit!
At Susan G. Komen, we believe that ending breast cancer needs all of us working together. Because if you've just been diagnosed and don't know where to turn, we've got you. If you can't afford the treatment you need, we've got you. And if you are driven to honor the loved one you've just lost, we have a place for you here. Because of you, we're supporting those who need help today while tirelessly searching for tomorrow's cures. Visit Komen.org and be a part of our Susan G. Komen community today.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
Got just a few minutes left here in conversation with Jerry Mitchell. His book is called Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder cases of the civil rights era. Jerry, a couple extra questions here. It seems to me that it is enough to try to get justice in real time, let alone to do what you and your team are doing at the center there, looking back on decades and trying to get these cases reopened.
Yes.
I'm curious as to how you sustain your hope. Again, if it's tough to get justice in real time, going back decades, it can't be easy.
Yeah, it's a lot. Those cases are harder, and but I'm a person of faith, and so I do have hope. And yes, justice. The way I think about it is this: in order to have justice, you have to have truth.
Mm-hmm.
But even if justice can't be found or justice is incomplete, as in some of these cases, you can still have truth. So that's what I view our role as, that is being able to assess truth as best we can, to share that with the public, which often doesn't know about these cases. Mm-hmm. So, or doesn't know much about these cases.
And the power.
So I consider, yeah.
I'm sorry. And the power, the power, the end result of the public being exposed to that truth, to your mind, is what?
People will begin to open their eyes. I know I've heard that with people who read my book and said, I had no idea all this happened. And so when people begin to open their eyes and realize what's happening, they realize and say, oh, this isn't just some little rogue group. This is like, this was a concerted effort, to bring about things. In the Mississippi burning case, I mean, you had the Meridian, there were Meridian police, were spying on Mickey Schwerner and his wife, and relaying that to the Sovereignty Commission. And so there are all sorts of things, connected up with these. When the Sovereignty Commission investigated, their investigator, who was he talking to when he went to town? The Klansman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, so there's very much a connection with leadership. I know some of these sheriffs have been members of the Klan. Some law enforcement were members of the Klan, and obviously law enforcement were involved in the killing of those 3 civil rights workers as well. So those are the kind of things, and that's why it's important to show this, because it shows not just an isolated incident, but a pattern.
It's a heavy lift. Somebody's got to do it, and I'm glad that Jerry Mitchell and his team are doing just that. He is the founder of the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting, author of the book Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder cases of the civil rights era. Jerry, once again, thank you for your work and witness. Good to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Good to have you on this program.
Appreciate it very much.
No, and given that you're a person of faith, I'll just say stay on the wall. You take my point.
Yeah,
stay
absolutely
on the wall. That's our program for today. Back here tomorrow, Lord willing, to do it all over again. Until then, thanks for tuning in to Tavis Smiley, and as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. New York City Mayor Eric Adams says he has no knowledge of improper fundraising activity for his campaign. The mayor released a statement after the FBI raided the Brooklyn home of his top fundraiser. Adams, who is black, says he is outraged and angry if anyone tried to use his campaign to manipulate democracy or defraud his campaign. The FBI is looking into whether Adams' 2021 campaign took foreign money through a straw donor scheme involving a construction company